Need a little inspiration? When we need new ideas for the Dreamiverse, we have a jam. We thought you might like to do that too. Every so often, we set a topic we're curious about, and anyone can make and submit a dream on that topic. Or you can just play through the current entries and see which ones you like. When time is up, we'll feature the dreams the community loved the most. Go on, give it a try.
In this tutorial, you're going to learn all about the exciting world of logic. Pay no attention to Cuthbert. It's not as complicated as it sounds. I promise. Let's check out the scene. See the buttons on the platforms in front of our good friend Connie? They activate the bridges that will take her to the next platform. At least that's what they're supposed to do. To get them working, you'll need to connect them to the gadgets that control them. You can't see gadgets when you're in play mode, but they let you do all sorts of useful things in edit mode. You can tell gadgets apart by their color and icons. Green gadgets are sensors and inputs. This one is what we call a trigger zone. It's one of the more versatile gadgets. It can trigger other gadgets when it detects something in the scene. Like in this case, Connie standing on the button. Hi, Connie. If you select the gadget with X, you'll be able to see its detection zone. That's it, right there above the button. Press the circle button to deselect the trigger zone, and let's look at the next gadget. Red gadgets are movers and outputs, meaning they make things happen in the scene. This particular gadget is a rotator, and it's connected to the first bridge. Click R3 to start time, and let's see what it does. Well, not a lot right now by the looks of it. That's because the rotator is switched off. You can tell because the gadget is dim at the moment. But if we connect these two gadgets together, we can turn the rotator on using the trigger zone. In the next step, I'll show you how. Before we start connecting things, make sure you can see both gadgets. You'll notice they have ports sticking out of their sides. Ports on the left are inputs, and the ones on the right are outputs. Hover over the output port on the trigger zone now. You'll see the word detected appear. That means that when the trigger zone detects something, this output will send a signal. Before it can send that signal to the rotator, though, we'll need to connect them with a wire. So hover over the detected output and press R2 or X. You'll notice your imp is now tethered to the port by a wire. Power ports have appeared on the gadgets too. It's these ports that switch gadgets on or off. OK, drag the wire over to the red rotator gadget. Now hover over the power port at the bottom, then press R2 or X. Once the gadgets are connected, the wire will disappear automatically. That way, your scene won't get cluttered. After all, you don't want wires all over the place. You can see the wire again by hovering over either gadget. OK, time to test our connection out. So let's switch over to play mode in the options menu. That's more like it. Now the trigger zone detects Connie when she stands on the button and activates the rotator on the bridge. As soon as she steps off, the rotator stops working. You can use the button to get the bridge lined up with the platform. Once Connie can make it to the second platform, you can head back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Now that we've connected the rotator, let's take a look at the second platform. See the white gadget on its side? This gadget isn't a sensor or an output. It's called a microchip. Microchips are used to organize logic in scenes. You can think of them as boxes of gadgets and wires. Let's have a look inside. Hover over this one with your imp. Hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group of objects. This window is the microchip's canvas. And if these gadgets look familiar, it's because they're two rotators. Each one controls half of this jointed drawbridge. Try to connect the output from the trigger zone to the power ports on the rotators. You can create multiple wires from the same output. Or you can clone wires in the scene by holding L1, then grabbing them with R2. Clone the wire near the rotator to create a new wire from the trigger zone. Once you've connected the trigger zone to the second rotator, switch over to play mode and make sure it's all working. OK, jumping on the button now will activate the trigger zone and raise the drawbridge so that you can cross over the... Oh, wait a minute. The bridge has dropped down before Connie could cross. That's because the signal to the rotator stopped sending as soon as Connie stepped off the trigger zone. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. In the next step, I'll show you how to make signals stay on. If we want the bridge to stay up, we'll need to add a gadget between the trigger zone and the rotator to keep it activated. We can do this with a counter. So let's go into the assembly menu. Press square to open it if it's closed. Select the Gadgets menu with X. You'll find the counter in the Logic and Processing section. The gadgets in this menu take an input signal and change it in some way before sending it on. Go ahead and select the counter. Its icon is a tally counter. Now you can see the gadget on your IMP. Hover over the microchip and it will snap to the canvas. Press R2 or X to stamp the counter onto the microchip, then press circle to unequip it. The counter gadget counts up or down whenever it receives a signal through its inputs. By default, it starts its count at 0 and has a target of 1. Once it reaches that target, it sends a constant signal through its counter-full output port. Before we connect it though, let's tidy up the wires connecting the trigger zone to the rotators. Just hover over them and press triangle to delete them. Now press R2 or X over the detected output of the trigger zone to create a new wire. Connect it to the increase count input port on the counter. That's the port with the plus sign icon. Now when the trigger zone is activated, the counter will go up to 1. And, this is the important part, it will stay at 1 even after the trigger zone deactivates. Now hover over the counter-full output port of the counter. This port sends a signal when the counter reaches its target. Create a wire with R2 or X and connect it to one of the rotator's power ports. Then do the same for the other one. Time to switch to play mode and try out our new connections. When you're happy everything's working as it should, return to edit mode and move on to the next step. Just one more bridge for Connie to cross. As you can see, we have another microchip on the platform, so let's open it up. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1 and press X. Okay, looks like we have everything we need here. But Connie's an adventurer, so how about we make this last bridge more challenging? Adding a timer to the logic should get the adrenaline going. Once Connie activates the button, she'll only have a few seconds to cross before the bridge drops back down. Let's head back to the assembly menu. If it isn't already open, press square. Then go into the gadgets section. You'll find the timer in the same place as the counter, the logic and processing section. Its button has a clock face on it. Now go ahead and stamp the timer gadget onto the microchip with R2 or X. Then unequip it from your imp with the circle button. Now let's take a closer look at the timer's inputs and outputs. You can see their names by hovering over the ports. The first input is a start timer port. Once this receives a signal, it will start the clock. The second one is reset timer, which sets the time back to 0. Over on the output side, we have timer finished and timer output. Timer finished sends a signal when the timer reaches the required number. It's set to 5 seconds by default. Timer output is a little more sophisticated. The signal it sends represents the timer's current progress. If, let's say, it's only halfway to its target, the signal it sends will be half strength. So how do we connect this so the bridge only stays up for a few seconds? Well, we need the bridge to be raised while the timer is running. So create a wire on the timer output with R2 or X. Remember how we used the counter on the previous platform? We can use one here too. Just like before, connect the wire to the counter's increase count input. Then connect the counter full output to the rotator's power port. Time to see if it works. Click R3 to test it out. As you can see, since the timer isn't connected to a trigger yet, the clock starts ticking as soon as we play the scene. The bridge goes up, but doesn't drop down when the timer finishes. That can only mean one thing. There's a problem with the logic. If you'd like to figure it out for yourself, feel free to check the gadgets and see what's wrong. Or move on to the next step and we'll go through it together. So let's take a look at why the bridge stayed up after the timer finished instead of going back down. Remember how we used the counter earlier to remember the signal from the trigger zone? Well, now it's remembering the signal from the timer, so we need to make it forget that once the timer finishes. Let's go over to the counter gadget. Hover over the inputs to see their names. This one here is reset count. It'll put the counter back to 0, which will turn off the rotator. So all we need to do is connect it to the timer, but to which output? Aha! There we go. We can use the timer finished output. Hover over it and create a wire with R2 or X. Then stretch the wire over to the counter and connect it to the reset count input. But we also need to reset the timer, otherwise the logic will only work once. So let's get another wire from the timer finished output and connect this one to the reset timer input. You'll recognize it by the rewind symbol on it. All we have left to do is to connect the trigger zone to the start timer port so Connie can activate it. Okay, that was a lot of connections. So before we test it out, let's go over the logic we've made. First, Connie activates the trigger zone, which sends a signal to start the timer. Once the clock starts running, the timer output becomes active. This tells the counter to count up. That then turns on the rotator and raises the bridge. Now this is where the really clever stuff kicks in. After 5 seconds, the timer finishes its count, which activates the timer finished output. This in turn resets the counter to 0, cutting the signal to the rotators and lowering the bridge. And let's not forget, it also resets the timer, so the logic could be triggered again if Connie didn't cross the bridge the first time. Isn't logic exhilarating? Take your time digesting all that. Logic is easier to read if you route your wires neatly. Grab wires with X to change their paths. You can also move the gadgets around by grabbing them with R2. Feel free to test it out in play mode, but don't leave the scene just yet. I have one more thing to show you. So, on the third platform, we've set up a timer that makes the bridge drop after 5 seconds. But I think that might be too easy for a seasoned pro like Connie. Let's make it a little bit more challenging. First, if you're in play mode, switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Let's move in closer to the microchip with the timer. You can use the grab cam, R1, to move your view. Now I'll show you how to tweak a gadget's settings. Hover over the timer gadget, hold L1 and press square. This tweak menu contains the settings for the timer. Hover over the sliders and buttons to see their names. The top slider sets the target time for the timer. If we lower this setting, the bridge will stay up for a shorter time. To adjust the value, hover your imp over the slider, then hold X. Use your imp to drag the slider left or right. Set it to around 3 seconds. It doesn't have to be exact. If you're a stickler for precision, you can adjust the slider incrementally using the up and down directional buttons. Just hover your imp over the slider and press up or down to tweak the value. In fact, why don't we make things really interesting for Connie? Let's set it to 2.5 seconds. You can close the tweak menu now by selecting the cross in the top corner with X. Or you could use a shortcut. Just hold L1, then press circle while hovering over the menu to close it quickly. The same shortcut works for closing microchips. Give it a try now. Hold L1, then hover your imp over the microchip and press circle. Time to test out the scene in play mode. If you have any problems crossing that last bridge, you can always tweak the timer again in edit mode. Remember, you just hover over the gadget, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. When you're all set, take Connie to the last platform and walk through the door to complete this tutorial. In this tutorial, you'll use logic to make health go up and go down. Oh, Cuthbert. Let's start by going into play mode. See if you can get Connie across that first gap. Oops. Sorry, Connie. I forgot to fix that. Don't worry, though. Even after falling such a long way, Connie's just fine. There's only one problem. There's no way for her to get back up. What we need is for Connie to respawn on a platform if she falls. So that's going to be our next job. First, switch back to edit mode. Remember to rewind time with L3, as we always do after play mode. In order to make Connie respawn, we're going to use a health modifier gadget. We'll use it to make the floor around the platforms lethal. Health modifiers can damage or heal anything that has a health manager. And, as luck would have it, Connie has one built into her logic. Go to the assembly menu. Open it with the square button if it's closed. Select the Gadgets menu, the one with the 3 connected squares. You'll find the health modifier in the Movers and Output section, which is represented by a box with an arrow. Now select the button that has a clockwork heart on it. Your imp will now be equipped with a health modifier gadget. Stamp it somewhere central, near the floor, using R2 or X. Then unequip the gadget with circle. Your scene now has a health modifier. But to make it work as intended, we'll have to tweak it first. We'll do that in the next step. Let's go ahead and open the Health Modifiers Tweak menu. Hover over it, hold L1 and press square. Here you can set the options for how the health modifier works. That includes how much health is modified, which is shown in the first slider. Right now, it's set to -100. This means it will take 100 health points away from anything it affects. Just enough to make Connie respawn. The modifier mode is set to per hit, so 100 health points will be taken away when anything touches it. But since we want the area around the platforms to be lethal, we need to set the modifier type to zone. Select the zone icon with X now, then go to the Zone Properties tab so we can change its size and shape. The icon is at the top of the menu and looks like a box in a zone. Look for the Zone Shape section of the menu, then select the cube. You can use the zone sliders to make the zone bigger. Be careful not to make it too tall. The respawn zone should be level with the pink lines around the platforms. If you need to, move the health modifier gadget nearer to the floor. When you hover over the edges of the zone, you'll see white arrow gizmos appear. Grabbing these with R2 will let you change the size of the zone. Using those, you can make sure the area around the platforms is covered. Now let's test it in play mode and see what happens. Perfect. If Connie falls off now, she'll just respawn back on the platform. Before we move on, maybe we should do something about this booby-trapped bridge. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. There. See what's causing it? It's that trigger zone. When Connie activates it, the bridge collapses and there's no way across. If you've finished the first logic tutorial, you'll know that the counter is being used to remember the trigger zone has been activated. If you follow the wires, you'll see there's one connected to each block. These red dots on the blocks are not gadgets. They show that a wire is connected to a setting in the block's tweak menu. Explore the logic for yourself. Or, if you want to move on and get Connie on her way, just delete the trigger zone by pressing triangle over it. That'll prevent any of the logic from activating. Then, once Connie can safely make it to the second platform, move on to the next step. Let's go ahead and open the Health Modifiers Tweak menu. Hover over it, hold L1 and press square. Here you can set the options for how the health modifier works. That includes how much health is modified, which is shown in the first slider. Right now, it's set to -100. This means it will take 100 health points away from anything it affects. Just enough to make Connie respawn. The modifier mode is set to per hit, so 100 health points will be taken away when anything touches it. But since we want the area around the platforms to be lethal, we need to set the modifier type to zone. Select the zone icon with X now, then go to the Zone Properties tab so we can change its size and shape. The icon is at the top of the menu and looks like a box in a zone. Look for the Zone Shape section of the menu, then select the cube. You can use the zone sliders to make the zone bigger. Be careful not to make it too tall. The respawn zone should be level with the pink lines around the platforms. If you need to, move the health modifier gadget nearer to the floor. When you hover over the edges of the zone, you'll see white arrow gizmos appear. Grabbing these with R2 will let you change the size of the zone. Using those, you can make sure the area around the platforms is covered. Now let's test it in play mode and see what happens. Perfect. If Connie falls off now, she'll just respawn back on the platform. Before we move on, maybe we should do something about this booby-trapped bridge. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. There. See what's causing it? It's that trigger zone. When Connie activates it, the bridge collapses and there's no way across. If you've finished the first logic tutorial, you'll know that the counter is being used to remember the trigger zone has been activated. If you follow the wires, you'll see there's one connected to each block. These red dots on the blocks are not gadgets. They show that a wire is connected to a setting in the block's tweak menu. Explore the logic for yourself. Or, if you want to move on and get Connie on her way, just delete the trigger zone by pressing triangle over it. That'll prevent any of the logic from activating. Then, once Connie can safely make it to the second platform, move on to the next step. Now's probably a good time to show you how to add checkpoints. When playable characters like Connie activate a checkpoint, the scene remembers their progress. So when they respawn, they'll appear at the last checkpoint instead of starting off at the beginning. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. If the last section you used is still open, close it by pressing circle over it. Expand the Gameplay Gear section with X, then select the checkpoint. It's the one that looks like a location marker. There. Now your imp is equipped with a checkpoint gadget. The direction of a checkpoint determines which way a character will face when it respawns. So make sure the front of the gadget, the side with the black outline, is facing the direction you want Connie to face. Remove the gadget from your imp with the circle button, then open the Checkpoints Tweak menu. Checkpoints use a detection zone, just like health modifiers. So select the Zone Size tab from the menu. This is set to a sphere by default, but to make sure it can't be missed, let's change it to a cube. You can use the zone size sliders to make the checkpoint cover the width of the platform. Above the gadget, you'll see a white Move gizmo. Grab it with R2 to put the activation zone where you want it. Just make sure Connie can't miss it. The white handle shows the direction Connie will face when she respawns. Check that it's pointing the right way. Grab it with R2 if you need to adjust it. Let's close that tweak menu with L1 and circle. Now try it out in play mode to see if the checkpoint remembers your progress. Sorry, Connie. We're gonna have to respawn you again. But it's all in the name of science, I promise. Great, there she is, right at the checkpoint again. When you're ready, go back to edit mode, rewind time, and move on to the next step. This next bridge looks a bit too hot to walk on. But Connie's a tough explorer, and she's always ready for danger, so let's give it a go. Okay, that block's too big for Connie to jump over. Better get her back to safety before it's too late. Let's switch back to edit mode and see how the bridge is damaging Connie. Move closer to the bridge and keep an eye out for any gadgets attached to it. Ah, there's one. A clockwork heart icon, so it's another health modifier. It looks like, instead of using a zone, this one is attached to the bridge. So whenever Connie walks on it, she loses health. If only that block wasn't in the way, she could make it across. But what if the block itself could lose health? We could give it a health manager of its own and see how that works out. Go to the Assembly menu, then open the Gadgets menu. You may need to close the Gameplay Gear section if you opened it earlier. Then you can expand the Movers and Output section. Look for a heart icon, not the clockwork heart this time. Select it with X to give your imp a Health Manager gadget. Stamp one near the block with R2 or X, then press circle to unequip it from your imp. To make the Health Manager affect the block, we'll need to attach it. The easiest way to attach gadgets to objects is to use what we call Surface Snap. Grab the Health Manager with R2 and hold it over the block. All you have to do to activate Surface Snap is hold L1 while your imp holds the gadget. This makes it hug the surface of any object you hover over. Now release R2 to attach the gadget to the block. You can also let go of L1 to stop using Surface Snap. In the next step, I'll show you how to tweak this Health Manager. Now that we've given the block health, let's take a closer look at it. Hover over the Health Manager, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. The sliders here define the block's maximum and current health. Click R3 to play time, and you'll see the health starts to go down. That's because the bridge's health modifier is damaging it. But you'll notice it's going down much slower than Connie's health was when she was on the bridge. The reason for that is this Health Manager has a 1-second cooldown. So whenever the block takes damage, it's invulnerable for 1 second after that. Grab the cooldown slider with X and pull it to the left with your imp. So what happens when it reaches 0? Not a lot right now. But we can deal with that in the next step. For now, feel free to experiment with the Health Manager settings. Start time with R3 to see your changes, then rewind it with L3 to reset the Health Manager. Once you're done, you can move on to the next step. An object doesn't automatically get destroyed when it runs out of health, so we need to do a bit more work before we can get rid of that block. Let's take a closer look at its Health Manager. If its tweak menu is still open, close that first with L1 and circle. See the output ports on its right edge. Hover over the one at the bottom, the one that has a heart with a cross over it. This is the no health output, which sends a signal when the Health Manager is depleted. It can be used to trigger any number of things, but right now, we're going to use it to destroy the block. Go to the Assembly menu and take a look in the Gadgets section. It may still be open from earlier, when you selected the Health Manager. Look for a skull icon on a button in the Movers and Output section and select it with X. This is the Destroyer gadget. It destroys whatever it's attached to. To attach it to the block, we can use Surface Snap. So hover the Destroyer over the block, hold L1 to make it Surface Snap, and press R2 or X to stamp it. Now you can unequip the Destroyer gadget with Circle. Okay, before we connect it up, let's just see if it works by clicking R3. Oh, it works all right. When time is running, the destroyer activates and destroys the block. Rewind time with L3 to bring it back. We don't want the destroyer to activate until the block's health has run out. To do that, we'll need to connect the no health output port to the destroyer's power. So hover your imp over the health manager's no health output port and press R2 or X to create a wire. This will make power ports appear on the gadgets in the scene. Stretch the wire over to the destroyer and connect it to the power port with R2 or X. Great! Time to test it again with R3 and see what happens. When the block's health runs out, it will get destroyed, leaving the path clear for Connie. But how do we know how much health the block has left? We could always look at its tweak menu, but you can't see that in play mode. So click L3 to rewind time, and I'll show you how to display health in the next step. If the Health Manager's tweak menu isn't open already, open it now with L1 and square. When you hover over the menu sliders and buttons, you'll see ports popping out of the side. These work just like the ones on the outside of the gadget, but there are a lot more of them. And you might also have noticed that there's another gadget stamped on the side of the block. That's a number displayer. If we connect a wire from the current health output to the number displayer's input port, we'll be able to see the block's health count down in play mode. So let's go ahead and do that. Hover over the current health slider's output port. Then press R2 or X to create a wire and stretch it to the number displayer. Once you've connected it to its input with R2 or X, you can switch over to play mode and test out the whole scene so far. Excellent. Now we can see the block taking damage until it's destroyed. Once you can get Connie to the next platform, switch back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Well, Connie made it through, but she's a bit worse for wear. The burn effect you see on her is triggered by the current health output from her health manager. It gives you a visual cue of her health. The more singed she gets, the less health she has. I'm not sure poor Connie has enough health left to make it across the last bridge. What she needs is a bit of healing, so let's create a healing zone where she can recharge. This green pad looks like a good place to recover. We can turn it into a healing zone by placing a health modifier on it, using Surface Snap. You've used Surface Snap before, so this should be no problem. Go to the Assembly menu and select a health modifier from the Movers and Output menu. It's the one with the clockwork heart on it, remember? Now activate Surface Snap by holding L1. Then attach the health modifier to the green pad. Now you can unequip the gadget with the circle button and open the modifier's tweak menu. We need to change it so it heals Connie. The health modifier is set to -100 by default, which won't do Connie any good. She has 100 health to start with, so that will take it all away and make her respawn. Grab the slider with X, drag it right, and set it to +20. We want the healing zone to heal Connie while she's standing on it, so you also need to set the modifier mode to continuous. You can leave the modifier type as impact, since you've snapped the health modifier to the platform. And that's all there is to it. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle, and give it a try and play mode. All right, that should give Connie the health boost she needs to cross that final bridge. Oh, she's been through a lot. Well, Connie made it through, but she's a bit worse for wear. The burn effect you see on her is triggered by the current health output from her health manager. It gives you a visual cue of her health. The more singed she gets, the less health she has. I'm not sure poor Connie has enough health left to make it across the last bridge. What she needs is a bit of healing, so let's create a healing zone where she can recharge. This green pad looks like a good place to recover. We can turn it into a healing zone by placing a health modifier on it, using Surface Snap. You've used Surface Snap before, so this should be no problem. Go to the Assembly menu and select a health modifier from the Movers and Output menu. It's the one with the clockwork heart on it, remember? Now activate Surface Snap by holding L1. Then attach the health modifier to the green pad. Now you can unequip the gadget with the circle button and open the modifier's tweak menu. We need to change it so it heals Connie. The health modifier is set to -100 by default, which won't do Connie any good. She has 100 health to start with, so that will take it all away and make her respawn. Grab the slider with X, drag it right, and set it to +20. We want the healing zone to heal Connie while she's standing on it, so you also need to set the modifier mode to continuous. You can leave the modifier type as impact, since you've snapped the health modifier to the platform. And that's all there is to it. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle, and give it a try and play mode. All right, that should give Connie the health boost she needs to cross that final bridge. Oh, she's been through a lot today, so take her through the door to end this tutorial. This tutorial is all about connectors. Something Cuthbert hasn't quite got the hang of. Connectors join objects together in a way that lets them move. We're going to use them to help Connie get to Cuthbert. First things first, though, we need to be precise when using connectors, so let's turn on the Grid Snap guide. That way, everything will line up properly. So, go to the Assembly menu and open the Guides section. Now select the grid icon with the X button. Now that Grid Snap is on, any objects you move and tools you use will snap in line with the grid in the scene. You can adjust how fine the grid is using the plus and minus icons on the button. But for this tutorial, it's best if you leave the grid size at 1. Now, let's see how we can make our way to Cuthbert. The best way to find out what needs to be connected is to play the scene and see for ourselves. But instead of switching over to play mode, we can start time in edit mode by clicking R3. Aha! Well, this is odd. The bridge has fallen down, but the second platform is still floating in place. Why is one object floating while the other is falling? Click L3 to rewind time. Let's check the bridge's tweak menu. Remember, tweak menus allow us to see and change the settings for objects in edit mode. Hover your imp over the bridge, hold L1 and press the square button to open its tweak menu. Tweak menus differ depending on what sort of object you're tweaking. The bridge is a sculpture. Sculptures are pretty complex things, and their tweak menus have lots of pages. To switch pages, use your imp to select the different tabs at the top. Maybe we'll find something on the physical properties page to tell us why the bridge is falling down. Its icon is a Newton's cradle, like one of those desk ornaments where the metal balls bash into each other. Select it with X. This page contains the sculpture's physical properties and attributes. There are lots of buttons and sliders here, but the one we're interested in is the top one. Aha! I thought so. Someone's gone and switched on the movable option. Okay, I admit it. It was me. Well, it wouldn't be much of an adventure if Connie could just stroll across the bridge, would it? Making something movable means it becomes physical. That means that forces in the scene, like collisions, the imp, or in this case gravity, can move it. Luckily, we can stop the bridge from falling down by adding a connector to it, which is exactly what we'll do in the next step, once you're ready to move on. So, all we need to keep the bridge from falling is a piece of string. Not just any piece of string, though. It's what we in the dream shaping business call a string connector. We'll need to attach the other end to something unmovable, like the blue cylinder above the bridge. Start by moving your imp with the left and right sticks until you can see the top of the bridge and the bottom of the blue cylinder. Make sure time is rewound. Click L3 if it isn't. Now open the Assembly menu and select the 3 connected squares to open the Gadgets menu. Look for the button with the joint icon, which will take you to the Connectors sub-menu. You can move the menu with your imp by grabbing it with R2. Select the String button. Its icon is the 2 circles connected by a wavy line. You'll see that a string connector appears on the tip of your imp. Now let's get connecting. You should always make the first connection from the object that won't move. We call this the parent object. In this case, it's the blue cylinder, but it could be something object that won't move. With your imp by grabbing it. Look for the button with the joint icon. which will take you to the Connectors submenu. You can move the menu with your imp by grabbing it with R2. Select the String button. Its icon is the two circles connected by a wavy line. You'll see that a string connector appears on the tip of your imp. Now let's get connecting. You should always make the first connection from the object that won't move. We call this the parent object. In this case, it's the blue cylinder, but it could be something else, like the frame of a door. See the yellow dot on the cylinder? I put that there to show the best place for a connection. So hover over it and press R2 or X to connect the string. The Grid Snap Guide will help you line it up exactly with the yellow spot. When you move your imp now, you'll notice it's tethered to the cylinder. It also has a blue gizmo on the end of it. Now let's stretch that string down to the bridge, all the way to the blue dot. The blue gizmo connects the string to the movable object, which we call the child object. Hover over the blue dot. See how the grid snaps it into line? Let's connect the string there with R2 or X. If your bridge isn't in line, just make sure that time is rewound. Now that the blue gizmo is connected, you can press the circle button to unequip the string connector from your imp. And there you have it. The cylinder and the bridge are connected. Click R3 to start time and check that it's working. Well, it looks a bit wobbly, but it's nothing Connie can't handle. Switch over to play mode and have a go. When you can get Connie across the bridge to the second platform, return to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Time to get Connie over to the third platform. So, the small pink platform and the blue step aren't much use to her right now. But if we make the platform move backwards and forwards, she can hop onto it and cross over. To do that, we'll need a connector called a piston. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. You'll find the piston in the Connectors section. It's somewhere near the middle and looks like, well, a piston. Now that it's equipped on your imp, you can start connecting. First, press R2 or X to join it to the blue step, which is unmovable, so it's the parent object. I've put a yellow dot on it to show you the best place to connect it. Next, connect the blue end to the child object, which is the floating platform. See how Grid Snap keeps the connector perfectly straight? Hover over the blue dot, then press R2 or X. Remember, the child object is the part that needs to be able to move. So when you join a connector to its child, that object will automatically become movable. When you've placed the piston, press circle to unequip it. Click R3 to test the connector. That's more like it. The piston is now moving the platform back and forth. Rewind time with L3. Now Connie might not be too happy if we make her jump on that. So let's calm the piston down a bit. First, open the piston's tweak menu. Hover anywhere over it, hold L1 and press square. If the tweak menu blocks your view of the piston, you can grab it and move it with R2. This white gizmo shows the maximum length and speed of the piston. You can change the speed by adjusting the slider with the clock icon, That's the cycles per minute. Grab the slider by holding X over it with your imp and reduce the value. The further to the left you move, the faster the number will change. It doesn't need to be exact. Somewhere around 15 should do it. But if you want to get a more precise number, you can adjust the slider with the up and down directional buttons instead. Notice how it's slowed down now. Click R3 to see it moving the platform. When you're happy with the speed, close the tweak menu with the close button or use L1 and circle. Then rewind time with L3. Time to switch over to play mode and test out the scene so far. Make sure the platform isn't moving too fast for Connie to jump on. You can always go back to edit mode and tweak the piston until you're happy with it. Once Connie has made it all the way across, rewind time in edit mode and move on to the next step. Alright, there's just one more gap for Connie to cross. We have a plank and a step to attach it to. For the plank to drop down, we'll need it to pivot like a hinge, which means we'll need to use a bolt connector this time. Go into the connectors section in the assembly menu. Select the icon with the nut on it. That's the bolt connector. Now you can connect it just like you did with the string and the piston. And because I'm so nice, I've placed some yellow and blue dots and a sneaky new purple one so that you can see where to make the connections. They're quite close together this time, so move in closer for a good view. Remember, you can use the grab cam on the R1 button to zoom in close. As always, connect the parent object first, the yellow dot. Then you can connect the child object, the blue dot. The grid snap will keep the bolt in a straight line so you don't have to worry about it. Once it's all connected, you can unequip the bolt connector using the circle button. You've probably noticed that there's a purple gizmo halfway along the bolt. That's the pivot which the bolt rotates around. Click R3 to see how it all works. Well, that's not right. It looks like we'll need to reposition the pivot to get the plank moving correctly. Click L3 to rewind time and reset the plank. Now go ahead and grab the purple gizmo with R2. Move it so it's by the purple dot. While you're grabbing the pivot gizmo with R2, press triangle to align it to the grid. Now grab it with L2 and use the sticks to rotate it so its axis goes through the bottom of the plank. The grid snap guide will help you line it up exactly. The child object, in this case the plank, will rotate around that axis. Once it's all lined up, switch over to play mode to test it out. If you've done it correctly, the plank should balance upright. Connie will need to push the plank down, unless, of course, the plank isn't long enough. Oh well, switch back to edit mode and rewind time. We'll sort out the plank in the next step. to edit mode and rewind time. We'll sort out the plank in the next to edit mode and upright. Connie will need to push the plank down, unless, of course, the plank isn't long enough. Oh well, switch back to edit mode and rewind time. We'll sort out the plank in the next step. To edit mode and upright. Once it's all lined up, switch over to play mode to test it out. Guide will help you line it up exactly. The child object, in this case the plank, will rotate around that axis. Once it's all lined up, switch over to play mode to test it out. If you've done it correctly, the plank should balance upright. Connie will need to push the plank down, unless, of course, the plank isn't long enough. Oh well, switch back to edit mode and rewind time. We'll sort out the plank in the next step. To make sure Connie can reach the last platform, we could always make the plank longer, but that's a completely different tutorial. Instead, let's try restricting the bolt's movement. We can do that by giving it an angle limit. First, you'll need to bring up the bolt's tweak menu. So hover over any part of the bolt, hold L1 and press square. You should see the Use Limits button about halfway down. Select it with X. And look at that. 3 handles have appeared, 2 pale yellow ones and a longer pale blue one. The yellow ones set the range of movement, which is represented by the transparent arc between them. We need to move one of these yellow handles so it's just a little bit left of vertical. It should look like an 11 o'clock position. Now move the other yellow handle to a 3 o'clock position. If your handle doesn't line up exactly, just press triangle while you're grabbing it. This will realign the handle to the grid. The blue handle represents the position of the child object, so you need to line it up with the plank in the 12 o'clock position. Press triangle to realign the handle to the grid if necessary. You can close the tweak menu now and head into play mode to test the scene. If everything's working correctly, Connie should be able to reach Cuthbert. And if you feel like experimenting, you can try out some other connector types. See what you can come up with. Then, when you're done editing the scene, go through the door in play mode to finish this tutorial. looks like Cuthbert is in a spot of bother. Connie needs our help to get across these platforms so she can rescue Cuthbert. So how about we add a little handmade animation to get her there? You don't need to go into play mode to see that Connie won't be able to make this jump. So let's animate that floating ledge down to her using an action recorder. Action recorders are super easy to use. Just stamp one in your scene, and it will record anything you move with the imp. And we mean anything. It'll even record you moving or tweaking gadgets. We'd better get going. Connie's getting really impatient. You know what cones are like. Go to the assembly menu. Press a square button if it's not already open. Then head to the animate menu. The animate icon is a clapperboard, that thing they use in movies before the director says, action. Now you get to be the director, and you can use these tools and gadgets to animate objects. Select the action recorder, the icon with a film strip and a plus sign on it. You'll now have an action recorder gadget on your imp. Stamp it down, somewhere near the floating ledge. A progress bar will appear at the top of the screen, along with a record button on the right. Also, your imp will turn red. This means you're ready to start recording. Don't worry, recording won't start until you begin moving or changing things. When you're ready, grab the floating ledge with R2. Move it slowly towards Connie using the motion sensor function or the sticks. You'll notice that the bar starts to fill, recording your every move. Don't worry, it's not a time limit. The bar fills up as a visual indicator of something being recorded, so take your time. When you let go of R2, the recording will pause. If you move your view or use the grab cam, that won't be recorded. But if you've started time with R3, recording will continue when you let go of R2. That's why it's important to rewind or pause time before recording anything. That way, your action recorder only contains what you put into it. When you've finished recording, select the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Or you can use the shortcut L1 and circle button to exit the action recorder. Your imp will go back to normal to show that recording has stopped. Click R3 to play back your animation. Handmade animations are always a bit wobbly, but practice makes perfect. Calibrating your imp can help when using the motion sensor function. Just hold your controller in a comfortable position, then hold the Options button for a few seconds. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit a recorded animation. Anything you record is stored in the Action Recorder gadget. If you hover over the floating ledge, the Action Recorder will pulse. Select the Action Recorder with X, and dashed lines will appear on the objects animated with it. It'll also show the animation path. That's this dashed line. If you're not happy with your animation, redoing it is easy. First, rewind time with L3. Then hover over the Action Recorder gadget, hold L1 and press X. Now we can start recording again. Select the Retake button in the context menu to replace the old animation. Now you can record a new one. Move the platform so it stops in front of Connie. You can undo actions you perform using the left directional button, but it won't undo any time that has passed. So it's better to use the Retake button to undo animations. Move the floating ledge from the upper platform down to Connie. Don't worry if the animation's too slow or too fast. We can fix that later. Make sure you press the stop recording button when you're done. Spend a little time practicing with the action recorder. In the next step, I'll show you how to tweak your animation. Another way to edit animations is to tweak them. Hold L1 and press the square button over the action recorder gadget to open its tweak menu. Here you can see all the tweaks for the action recorder. By default, the playback mode is set to loop, so it plays the animation over and over again. But you can set them to play once, sustain, or to ping pong. Once will play the whole animation just one time. Sustain will play the animation for as long as the action recorder has power. If it loses power, it will stop. Then it will continue from that point when it's powered again. Ping pong plays the animation forward once, and then plays it in reverse. Then forward, then backwards, and so on. That sounds like a good option for our floating ledge. Select ping pong with X. Click R3 to start time and play the animation. You can also change the animation speed to make it slower or faster. Grab the slider with X and use your IMP to change the speed. If you want to explore more of the action recorder tweaks, you can. If you hover over any button for a few seconds, a more info tip will explain what that tweak does. To close the tweak menu, just hold L1 and press the circle button anywhere over it. And of course, you can undo any changes you make by pressing the left directional button. Switch to play mode to test your changes. When you're ready, come back to edit mode and start the next step. Now that Connie's made it up to the higher platform, how will she get back down to the next one? First, rewind time with L3. You probably already know about cloning objects, but do you know that you can clone their animations along with them? I'm sure you remember how to clone, but if not, just hold L1 and grab the ledge you animated with R2. Once you've made the clone, release L1, then move the ledge to the other side and release R2 to place it. Not only did you clone the ledge, but you also cloned its animation. Click R3 to start time. Now we just need to flip it so that it moves in the correct direction. First, make sure you rewind time. Grab the platform with R2. Then click L3 to flip it horizontally. Depending on where you grabbed it, you might have to move it closer to the other platform after flipping. You may also need to realign it with triangle before releasing R2 to put it back down. Now click R3 to start time, and the platform should move in opposite directions. Both animations are stored in the same action recorder. So if you retake or delete the action recorder, it will affect both animations. Now go into play mode and see if Connie can make it across both gaps. Switch back to edit mode when you're ready to move on. Now let's get Connie to Cuthbert and get them through the door, before Cuthbert has a total meltdown. I've placed a shiny helper cube, let's call it Cuthbot, that holds up the next platform, but it's not very animated at the moment. To get it to walk back and forth towards the exit, we need to use Record Possession. It allows you to possess puppets and record a performance with them. Open the Assembly menu, then go to the Animate menu. Select Record Possession. It's the button with the sock puppet icon. Your imp can now possess the puppets in the scene. In the Context menu, you'll see the Count-In button. When this is selected, you'll get a 3-second count-in before recording starts. Press R2 over the Cuthbot to possess the puppet and start the countdown. When the count reaches 0, the possession recorder begins recording. Unlike the action recorder, it records constantly. So time will be recorded even when the cube isn't moving. Walk the Cuthbot around the obstacles to the final platform. Pause for a moment, turn around, then walk back to where the Cuthbot started. Starting and ending at the same place will help to make the animation loop smoothly. Press the circle button to depossess. You'll notice that the recording pauses when you depossess. Select Stop Recording in the Context menu to exit the possession recorder. Once you've stopped recording, click L3 to rewind time, then R3 to start time, and watch what you've recorded. In the last step, I'll show you how to edit the recorded possession. You may have noticed a possession recorder gadget has appeared next to the Cuthbot. When you're using Record Possession, this gadget appears the moment you press the Stop Recording button. Select it with X to view the animation path. The Possession Recorder gadget also lets you edit and tweak the animation. Hold L1 and press X over the Possession Recorder to scope in and edit it. Just like the action recorder, you can choose to retake the animation by selecting the button in the Context menu. To stop editing the possession recorder, select Stop Recording in the Context menu. Or hold L1 and press the circle button to quickly scope out. You can also tweak the possession recorder with L1 and the square button. It has exactly the same options as the action recorder. Experiment with the recorder and the different tweak options. Remember, you can see more info about the tweak settings by hovering over them for a few seconds. Close the tweak menu by pressing L1 and the circle button anywhere over it. Once you're done editing, switch over to play mode to test out the completed scene. Then Connie can navigate to the last platform and help Cuthbert through the door to complete the tutorial. might be able to animate wobbly platforms with the action recorder, but keyframes are where animation gets serious. Nice try, Cuthbert, but leave the dream shaping to the experts. We're going to use keyframes to animate the platforms so Connie can reach the exit. A keyframe records any changes you make to an object, such as its position, tweak menu settings, or anything else you can think of. Then it stores those changes in a gadget that you can switch on and off. Okay, let's use keyframes to help Connie get across those platforms. First, go to the assembly menu. If it's closed, press the square button to open it. Look for the Animate button, which has a clapperboard icon, and click on that. Start by selecting the keyframe gadget, which is the one with the diamond and the plus sign. Then stamp it in the scene above the first gap. You'll notice there's now a Stop Recording button in the context menu, and your imp now looks like a red keyframe. That means the keyframe gadget is recording any changes you make in the scene. But unlike the action recorder, it only records the state of things, not a period of time. It's probably easier to understand if we put it into practice. Let's try it on the block that's on the ground in front of Connie. Grab it with R2 and place it between the first two platforms. You'll see some dashed lines appear on the block. These tell you that the keyframe has recorded the change you've made to the object. You can move it as many times as you like. It'll only store the final result. If that's not the outcome you wanted, you can always undo your last change with the left directional button. The next bit is super important. To finish and store your changes in the keyframe, you need to select the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Select it now and see what happens. That's right. The block has snapped back to its original position. That's because the keyframe isn't active right now. But we can still see what's recorded by selecting the gadget with X. There, the block is back to where you moved it. You'll notice the keyframe doesn't record how things moved, just where they moved to. Make sure you deselect the keyframe before moving on. You can do that by pressing the circle button. In the next step, I'll show you how to use your keyframe in the scene. Now that you've recorded a keyframe, let's look at how to activate it. See the trigger zone above the first platform? Select it with X to check its area of effect. OK, it looks like the zone stretches across the whole gap. Deselect it with the circle button. Then use the sticks or the grab cam to move in closer to the gadget. You'll notice an output port on its side, labelled Detected. This sends a signal when it detects a possessed puppet like Connie. We need to connect this to the keyframe, so select the port with R2 or X to create a wire. Then stretch it to the keyframe gadget with your imp and use R2 or X to connect the wire to the power port. Now the trigger zone signal will switch on the keyframe when it detects Connie. Try it out in play mode. Just press the options button and select the controller icon. See, as soon as Connie enters the trigger zone area, the block springs into place. Well, it works okay, but the animation's a bit fast, don't you think? We can do something about that after you take Connie across. Head back into edit mode. Rewind time with L3, and I'll show you how to add smoothing to the keyframe in the next step. Okay then, we've made a simple keyframe animation. Now it's time to smooth it out and make it look better. Like almost everything in Dreams, keyframes can be tweaked. So open this one's tweak menu. Hold L1, then press the square button over it. You'll see two sliders at the bottom, slow power up and slow power down. These determine how long it takes for the keyframe to turn on fully. Hover over the slow power up slider now and hold X. Then move your IMP to the right to increase the value. Let's set it to 1 second for now. You can set slow power down to any value you like. Then close the tweak menu by selecting the cross icon in the corner. Or you can hold L1 over the menu, then press the circle button. Let's see what that looks like in play mode. Ah yes, that looks a lot smoother. If you're happy with the new animation, switch back to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 and move on to the next step. It looks like the bridge across the next gap has collapsed. We could just move it back into place, but where's the fun in that? Let's perform a little bit of magic instead. Go to the Assembly menu and select another keyframe from the Animate menu. Stamp it above the gap with R2 or X. Now see if you can reassemble the bridge. Grab the first part and move it back where it should be. One of the great things about keyframes is that they can affect multiple objects. So you can put the other half of the bridge back too. Then select Stop Recording from the Context menu to store your changes. Once recording stops, the bridge will go back to its original position. So, select the keyframe with X if you want to see those changes again. I could have done a better job at positioning the bridge. Nothing to worry about though, because editing a keyframe is easy. Just select the Edit Keyframe button in the Context menu. It's got the same icon as a keyframe gadget. This allows you to make changes to the keyframe. You can remove things from a keyframe by pressing the triangle button over them. And now the bridges are back on the ground. Let's put them back into place, but this time, make sure they're a bit straighter. Remember, when you're grabbing things, you can realign them by pressing the triangle button. There we go. Much better. You can select Stop Recording again to finish editing this keyframe. Then move on to the next step when your bridge is in place. Recording again to finish editing this key. Align them by into place. Keyframe by press. Got the same icon. So, select the keyframe with X if you want to see those changes again. I could have done a better job at positioning the bridge. Nothing to worry about though, because editing a keyframe is easy. Just select the Edit Keyframe button in the context menu. It's got the same icon as a keyframe gadget. This allows you to make changes to the keyframe. You can remove things from a keyframe by pressing the triangle button over them. And now the bridges are back on the ground. Let's put them back into place, but this time, make sure they're a bit straighter. Remember, when you're grabbing things, you can realign them by pressing the triangle button. There we go. Much better. You can select Stop Recording again to finish editing this keyframe. Then move on to the next step when your bridge is in place. The bridge's new position is already stored in the keyframe, so all we need now is a way to activate it. That's where this trigger zone will come in handy. Let's select it to see what zone it covers. It's not in the gap this time. It's over this button. First, create a wire from the trigger zone's output using R2 or X. Then stretch it over to the keyframe and connect it to its power port. When Connie steps on the button now, the keyframe will be switched on. But what happens when she leaves the trigger zone? Let's test it in play mode to find out. Just as I thought. When Connie moves away, the keyframe switches off. Let's head back to edit mode and see what we can do about that. Of course, we could just move the trigger zone into the gap, but this is an animation tutorial. So let's see if we can use the keyframe's tweak menu to fix the problem. Open it now with the L1 and square button shortcut and have a look at the options there. Hovering over the buttons will bring up their names. The one we're interested in is called Keep Changes. With this option turned on, any changes made by the animation will be permanent. So once Connie activates the keyframe, the bridge will stay in its new position until you rewind the scene. Since we're already in the tweak menu, let's add some smoothing to that animation. I think I'll set it to 2 seconds this time. Okay, time to close the tweak menu with L1 and the circle button. Then try out these changes in play mode. How's that for a magic trick? You can switch back to edit mode, rewind time, and experiment with the keyframe to see what else you can do. Maybe you could try keyframing a tweak menu setting, or animating some elements from the tutorial collection. When you're done, move on to the next step, and I'll show you how to use keyframes on a timeline. Keyframes are great for making simple animations. But if you want to make something more complex, you need a timeline. See that little block floating between the last 2 platforms? Let's use keyframes on a timeline to animate it. Start by selecting a timeline from the Animate menu. Stamp it down somewhere around the last gap. Then you can use the circle button to unequip the gadget. Now open the timeline, hold L1 over it and press X. This is the timeline canvas. You can move the canvas with your imp by grabbing it with R2. The numbers along the top are seconds, and you can see it set to 8 seconds by default. If you grab the edges with X, you can extend or shorten the canvas. Try setting it to around 6 seconds. If you ever need extra space to add more things, you can also extend the bottom of the timeline. Once you're comfortable with moving and resizing the timeline canvas, move on to the next step and we'll start adding things to it. Now, it's time to animate the floating block. Get a new keyframe from the Animate menu and stamp it in the scene. Now grab and move the block to its starting position at the edge of the platform where Cuthbert's waiting. Once the block's in place, remember to press the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Now, grab the keyframe gadget and move it over the timeline. The gadget will snap to it. Place it at the very start of the timeline. Then get another keyframe from the Animate menu. We'll use this one to record the block's second position. This time, stamp the keyframe directly onto the timeline. Around the 2-second mark is good, on the same row as the first keyframe. On the use this. Now grab and move the block to its starting position at the edge of the platform where Cuthbert's waiting. Once the block's in place, remember to press the stop recording. Now, it's time. Now grab and move the block to its starting position at the edge of the platform where Cuthbert's waiting. Once the block's in place, remember to press the stop recording button in the context menu. Now, grab the keyframe gadget and move it over the timeline. The gadget will snap to it. Place it at the very start of the timeline. Then get another keyframe from the Animate menu. We'll use this one to record the block's second position. This time, stamp the keyframe directly onto the timeline. Around the 2-second mark is good, on the same row as the first keyframe. Move the floating block to the opposite side of the gap. Now stop recording. Hover over the timeline canvas and play controls will appear. Using these controls, you can preview just the timeline without playing the rest of the scene. Select the play button to preview your animation. As you can see, gadgets are only active when the timeline's playhead is over them. So, when neither of the keyframes are switched on, the block goes right back to its original position. Now we need to edit the animation so the first keyframe blends into the second. To do that, open the first keyframe's tweak menu with L1 and the square button. Now that the keyframe is on a timeline, the buttons that were grayed out before are available. These are blend types, and they change how one keyframe merges into the next. Select the linear button, which will blend to the next keyframe at a constant speed. If you press the timeline's play button now, you'll see the platform move smoothly between the keyframed positions. Feel free to try out other blend types and see how they affect the animation. Then move on to the next step when you're ready. Now, it's time to animate the floating block. Get a new keyframe from the Animate menu and stamp it in the scene. Now grab and move the block to its starting position at the edge of the platform where Cuthbert's waiting. Once the block's in place, remember to press the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Now, grab the keyframe gadget and move it over the timeline. The gadget will snap to it. Place it at the very start of the timeline. Then get another keyframe from the Animate menu. We'll use this one to record the block's second position. This time, stamp the keyframe directly onto the timeline. Around the 2-second mark is good, on the same row as the first keyframe. Move the floating block to the opposite side of the gap. Now stop recording. Hover over the timeline canvas and play controls will appear. Using these controls, you can preview just the timeline without playing the rest of the scene. Select the play button to preview your animation. As you can see, gadgets are only active when the timeline's playhead is over them. So, when neither of the keyframes are switched on, the block goes right back to its original position. Now we need to edit the animation so the first keyframe blends into the second. To do that, open the first keyframe's tweak menu with L1 and the square button. Now that the keyframe is on a timeline, the buttons that were grayed out before are available. These are blend types, and they change how one keyframe merges into the next. Select the linear button, which will blend to the next keyframe at a constant speed. If you press the timeline's play button now, you'll see the platform move smoothly between the keyframed positions. Feel free to try out other blend types and see how they affect the animation. Then move on to the next step when you're ready. We've got the platform moving smoothly now, but we can still improve how it works. Let's begin by making it pause for a moment at the start and finish, so Connie has an easier time getting on. All we have to do is scale the keyframes on the timeline, so they last longer. You might want to get up close to the first keyframe before we start. Now, with your imp over the keyframe, hold the up directional button to extend it. Then do the same with the second keyframe. Now that the keyframes are longer, the blend has become quicker. You can see it for yourself by selecting the play button under the timeline. If you want to scale a keyframe more precisely, you can do that with its trim handles. Trim handles are the dotted lines at the beginning and end of keyframes. Grab them now with R2 to give it a try. We should get the platform back to where it started now, but instead of adding a new keyframe, we're going to clone the first one. You remember how to clone things, right? Just hold L1 and grab the first keyframe with R2. Now drag it past the second keyframe and place it by releasing R2. Now we just need to add the blending between the last two keyframes. Only this time, we'll use a shortcut instead of the tweak menu. Just hover over the space between those keyframes, then hold L1 and press X. There you go, one linear blend added. You can even cycle through different blend types by keeping L1 held and pressing X again. I love shortcuts because I'm lazy. Use the play controls on the timeline to preview the animation. Move on to the final step when you're ready to continue. Now, because there's some space at the end of the timeline where none of the keyframes are active, the platform just snaps right back to its original position. There's a few ways we could fix this. For example, we could shorten the timeline so there's no gap at the end. We could also lengthen the keyframe animation so it fills up the whole timeline. Or we could turn on Keep Changes in the last keyframes tweak menu. The last step is tweaking the timeline itself. So, hold L1 anywhere over it, then press the square button to see all of its properties. The playback speed makes it go faster or slower. But what we're interested in right now is the playback mode. When it's set to once, the whole timeline will play, even if it was only powered for a split second. When it's set to sustain, it will only play when it has constant power. It will stop when it loses power, then resume from that point if it's turned on again. And if it's set to loop, it will repeat over and over as long as it has power. That sounds like the best option for this timeline, so select that one. Okay, it looks like we're good to go. You can close the timeline now by selecting the cross icon in the top right corner. Or you can hold L1 over the timeline itself, then press the circle button. Click L3 to rewind time and test out your changes in play mode. Once you're happy with everything, exit through the door to complete this tutorial. Are you ready to get those creative juices flowing? This tutorial's all about making your creations beautiful. Now, this is Connie's front garden. But what's this? It's had all the colour, style and magic sucked out of it. But not to worry, Connie. We can help make the garden pretty again with the power of dreams. Just to start you off, all the lighting's already done. We can learn more about that later. And because I'm ever your servant, I've also grouped some of these objects just for you. It'll make editing them quicker and easier. So what does the garden need? Well, it could do with some colour, texture and movement. Luckily, the coat, style and effects modes are the perfect tools to do that. They don't create new objects, they modify existing sculptures and paintings. And they work on groups. With just a little practice, you can become a master of them all. So let's start by adding some colour with the tint tool. Open the assembly menu with the square button and go to the modes menu. Each mode has its own set of tools and options. The tint tool is in coat mode. It has an icon that looks like a pot of paint being spilled. Select it by pressing the X button. As you can see, the assembly menu has now been replaced with the coat menu. In the top row, you'll find options and helpers. Along the bottom, you'll find the tools. Now, which colour to use? Open the Colours menu in the top row of icons. These are colour groups. You can expand a colour group with X. Each group contains more shades that you can choose from. I'm going to find a green for the foliage, but if green's not your thing, you can experiment. Is the menu too long? You can scroll it by grabbing it with R2. Pick a shade, or if you fancy a more painterly or organic look, choose the tumbler colour at the end of the group. That will apply a random shade that changes as you work. When you've chosen a colour, you're ready to go to the next step. To add colour to our scene, we'll use the Tint tool, which has an icon like an airbrush. You can manually select it in the Tools menu. But in Coat mode, choosing a colour from the Colours menu equips the Tint tool automatically. See the airbrush icon on the tip of your imp. The Tint tool recolours objects, either tinting or completely covering their original colour. Just press and hold R2 to tint the objects at the tip of your imp. No need to select or scope into anything. The rounded clumps look a bit dreary in this scene. Let's add some colour. You can see that the longer you hold R2, the stronger the tint gets. And with a tumbler colour selected, it will cycle through different shades. If you make a mistake, you can undo using the left directional button. Or set your tool to subtract and you can detint. How do you do that? If you press triangle while the tool is active, your imp will change to an outline. So now it will remove tint instead of adding it. And that works on pretty much all of the coat, style and effects tools. Just press triangle when they're equipped to make them subtractive. Try removing some colour using subtractive tint now. Just hold R2 over the object. And to make the tool additive again, press triangle. Now that you've got to grips with that, you can colour in the whole scene with the tint tool. Go wild. Use different colours to tint the path, rocks, river, grass, trees, and the little cottage. The Colours menu has all the colours you need. Just open a colour group and pick a shade, or the tumbler colour. Take some time to colour your scene. When you're done, move on to the next step. Good job. Now your scene is beautifully coloured in, let's add some texture to it. For that, we need to leave coat mode and go into style mode. To leave a mode, select the exit button in the top right of the screen. Or you can use a shortcut. Hold L1 and press circle. Just like scoping out of a group. Now use the Modes menu to switch over to Style mode. The Style mode icon is an S-shaped brushstroke. All sculptures and paintings in Dreams are made up of flecks, and Style mode is where we manipulate them. For example, notice how the objects in this scene look smooth. That's because their flecks are small and tightly packed together. We can make them more textured with the Looseness tool. Select the Looseness tool. It looks like a blurry circle. Now try using R2 to loosen some of the foliage in the scene. Don't hold back. As you can see, loosening sculptures and paintings means their flecks become more obvious. If you think they're getting too loose, press triangle to make the tools subtractive and tighten them up again with R2. Or you can just use the left directional button to undo. Don't forget to loosen up the river too. We'll need it in the following steps. Carry on loosening the objects in the scene. When you're happy, proceed to the next step. Wonderful! Connie's garden looks like a lovely painting. Let's look at the water now. Water has a reflective quality, so let's add some shine to the river. This is where the Finish tool comes in. Exit out of Style mode with L1 and circle and head back into Coat mode in the Modes menu. Next to the Colours menu in Coat mode, you'll find the Finishes menu. Select it with X. These finishes change the way objects react to light in your scene. Using finishes, you can make objects shiny, rough, metallic, or even translucent. Now you can choose your finish for the river. Let's see. Ah, yes. How about shiny wax? Wax finishes are translucent, and the shine will give the river a reflective surface that will catch the light. Apply the finish as before using R2, Remember that you can revert your changes by switching to subtractive mode with triangle, or by using undo. Try editing the finish on other groups and objects in the scene. Continue to the next step when you're ready. Our river looks nice and shiny now, but something's missing. It doesn't flow like water does. But there's a magical tool for that in effects mode. It's called the flow tool. Leave coat mode if you haven't already, and enter effects mode. The effects mode icon has some twinkly stars on it. Alongside the flow tool, you'll notice other animated effects that you can apply to sculptures or paintings. But for now, we'll pick the flow tool. Its icon is a tap, or a faucet if you're from the US. Press X over the flow tool to select it, and use R2 to apply it to the river. Isn't that lovely? In effects mode, you can preview the flow effect even when time is paused. But if you leave effects mode, you'll need to click R3 to see the effects in action. When the river's flowing at the right speed, you may notice something a bit odd. It's flowing the wrong way. Let's fix that using another tool found in Style mode, the Comb tool. Leave effects mode using L1 and circle, then go back into Style mode via the Modes menu. The Comb tool icon is some wavy lines. Select it with X. Now we're going to make the river flow the correct way. How do we do that? You guessed it. Hold R2 to comb the flecks of the river so they go in the right direction. We're no longer in effects mode, so we can't see the flow effect animating. But just click R3 to start time, and you'll be able to see it again. The key is to move your imp in the direction you'd like the flecks to flow. A bit like you're combing the river's hair. Very stylish. Let go of R2 when you're happy with the flow direction. And now you can see the river is going the correct way. But if it isn't, just undo and try again. When you're happy with the speed and direction of the river, click L3 to rewind time. Then it's off to the next step. This scene is really coming together. Next, let's do something interesting with the chimney smoke. Move closer to the smoke so you can see the flecks clearly. These flecks don't look very smoky, do they? Let's change that. If you're not already in Style mode, head there now using the Modes menu. Open the Flex menu with X. It's the button in the center of the top row. Now choose a fleck that looks smoky. How about the dots fleck? When you choose a fleck type, it'll automatically select the Apply Fleck tool. Now, hover your imp over the smoke and hold R2. The flecks will change. That's better. Let's inspect it now using the grab cam. Grab it with R1. And while you're grabbing, spin around it with the left or right stick. The paint strokes look a bit flat, don't they? You can only see them well from certain angles. We can make it a bit more billowy and three-dimensional using the Impasto tool. In the Style menu, select the Impasto tool, then hold R2 to apply it to the smoke. Watch as the individual flecks of the painting become more three-dimensional. To see it better, use the grab cam to spin around the smoke again. You can also press undo and redo to compare the smoke with and without Impasto. Now that you've mastered Impasto, the last style tool we're going to use is the Ruffle tool. The Ruffle tool icon looks like a lot of lines going in different directions. It will randomly rotate the flecks so they're not as orderly. It works in the same way as the other two tools. Select it with X, then use R2 to apply it. And switch the tool to subtractive by pressing triangle. Ruffle makes quite a difference, doesn't it? Why not see if you can animate the smoke using the flow tool in effects mode? When you're happy, go to the next step of the tutorial. Now that the scene is looking good, we should make Connie's cottage look more welcoming for her. We can do that using something called the Glow tool. So head back to the Modes menu and into Coat mode. The Glow tool has an icon that looks like a little sun. Select it with X, then move your view over to the cottage for a closer look. Now position your view so that you can see the door and the window of the cottage. Then hold R2 over the window in the door to make it glow. Go on, give it some welly. Whoa, that's too bright. Let's press triangle to make the tool subtractive, then use R2 to reduce the glow. Maybe you could try tinting the window to change the color of the light. See what you think. Have a play with the Glow tool, and then move on to the next step when you're ready. The scene looks so alive now, and Connie's in love with her new home. It's hard to believe that this scene used to be all grey and blocky. Let's try something. How different did we actually make it? To see, we can use a special trick. Press square to open the menu, and then take a look in the Show Hide section. The Show Hide icon looks like an open eye. It can be found in most of the Modes menus. In the Show Hide menu, you can make all sorts of different objects visible or invisible. It only works in edit mode, so your scene will still look the same in play mode. Some of them are on by default, and some are switched off. Coat, Style and Effects is one of the options which is on by default. Its icon is a combination of the icons for all three of those modes. Try turning it off by pressing X over it. Wow, what an amazing difference. That shows you how powerful these tools really are. Using Coat, Style and Effects, you can make even the most boring block come alive. Practice using the tools and see what you can come up with. When you're finished, go to Play Mode in the Options menu and walk Connie into her beautiful new home. This will complete the tutorial. In this lesson, I'll show you how to sculpt your own objects from scratch, which will come in handy because Cuthbert's having a meltdown. Again. Fortunately, we can use the tools in Sculpt mode to help get Connie to Cuthbert and escort him to safety. Go to the Assembly menu. Press the square button to open it if it's closed, and select the Modes menu with the X button. Select in this lesson. In this lesson,